Today we're talking about the Amaran Ray 60C and 120C. These are tiny little lights that pack a lot of output for their size, and they are highly color accurate to boot. So let's jump in. There are 4 total lights in the Amaran Ray lineup, and we reviewed the 660C a few weeks ago. Now we're focusing on the smaller, more creator-oriented COB lights, the 60C and the 120C. Look down below for a link to the 660C review if you're interested in that. The model numbers refer generally to the amount of power that they each use, but it's not 100%. For example, the 120C, actually I measured at 140 watts using the Amaran Peak battery. We'll talk more about that in just a little bit. But this video here today is being lit right now with the light, the 60C. It is set to 60% intensity. We're set on our camera to ISO 800, 23.976 frames per second, 180 degree shutter angle, f2.8, and just incidentally, we're at 5600 Kelvin for the color temperature. This is the 60C right here in the Octa Dome 120. It's about 2 meters from me, and that's the key light. And then the rim light here, the hair light, is actually the 120C back here with the included softbox, which is the Octa Dome, I believe it's the Octa Dome 30. So that's what you're looking at here. Full disclosure, Amaran sent all of these to me. They have not paid me further. They did not charge me for these lights, so that was the free part. They have not told me what to say. They have not reviewed this video prior to posting, so all the opinions here are my own. And this video is sponsored by Learn Light and Sound, where we have courses teaching you how to improve your lighting and sound for video. Link down below. Okay, let's look at the color accuracy. Here are the photometrics compared to the Ray 660C. And I think the highlight for me is the SSI is 84 at 3200 Kelvin and 82 at 5500 Kelvin. That's much better than most LED lights on the market, and that's largely because the Amaran Ray uses the omni-color light engine. And this light engine mixes multiple LED colors. So on the COB you have 2 reds, a green, 2 blues, an indigo, and a soft white, which is a combination of lime and a sort of tungsten white. Cool thing about the omnicolor light engine is that you get better color quality than similarly priced competitive lights, and they're less expensive to produce than the high-end aperture lights that use the Blair and the Blair CG. So you trade off a little bit in terms of color quality versus the aperture Blair lights, but you generally are getting better color quality than most other competitors. Now, one of the questions that came up is when you dim these lights way down, say to 1%, and you can dim them in 1% increments, what happens to the color quality? And what we saw was that the SSI, Spectral Similarity Index, was still 82. So it looks like because of the way the color engine works, or the light engine works, you're still getting very high color quality even at low dim settings. All right, these are IP54 rated, meaning they are splash resistant, so they're probably going to be fine in the rain, but they're not waterproof, so don't dunk them in the water. And also they are dust resistant. Not totally sealed, but you're probably going to be okay in most circumstances. The Bluetooth control via the excellent Amaran app is fantastic. Also, you can NFC pair them with your phone or your mobile device to control them. Makes it so much faster to get everything set up and paired and ready to go. So, and the lights don't even have to be on to NFC pair them, which is pretty cool. The fans are quiet. They rarely come on unless you're in a hot space or running the intensity above 60%. And again, remember right now we're at 60% and the fan is not on, which I love. These also include the flow turn knob, which makes for faster adjustments. And the idea is that you can just kind of flick the knob and it will keep going until you press your finger against it again to stop it. And at first I thought this would be kind of a gimmick, but I've actually found it to be surprisingly helpful to get to those numbers. If you need to make a big change quickly, just spin that knob, let it go, tap when you're ready for it to stop in the general area where you want it to stop, and then you can just slowly adjust it to fine tune. These lights have a Bowens-mount, and there are a new line of light modifiers that go along with it that are optimized for these lights. And we'll talk more about that in just a second. There is an all-metal yoke that holds the light and the DC power adapter that comes with it, or the AC power adapter that comes with it. The yoke is surprisingly strong and can support the Ray-designed modifiers. So I would avoid the aperture and the other heavier modifiers because I'm not 100% sure that it would be able to hold those. But the new Amaran Ray modifiers are fantastic. They're lighter weight, but they do they're also optimized for the beam angle of these lights, which incidentally is 70 degrees, and we'll come back to that as well. But for example, the Octa Dome 120 here has two diffusers, an inner diffuser and an outer diffuser, to manage the kind of slightly tighter beam angle of these lights. Build quality wise, it's a plastic cover with composite Bowens-mount. So the Bowens-mount itself is not metal, but it's a really tough sort of composite material. And based on the weight of the overall unit, I suspect there's an internal metal frame. It can handle all of the Amaran Ray designed lights, and including the large ones, like here, for example, we're using the Octa Dome 120. So that's all fantastic. Again, that all-metal yoke holds the light and the power adapter with this kind of clever rubber strap that holds the AC-DC power adapter in place. Now, one thing with the yoke that I did notice is that with the bigger light modifiers, you can't necessarily lean it forward to aim it down at your subject, which is a little bit of a problem, but you can work around that. In this case, for example, I used a grip head with a baby pin, and we angled that down a little bit so that we could get it aimed right at my face. So you're going to need to do something similar to that if that's how you light. If you're interested in understanding which modifiers work with these lights, take a look at their product page on amarancreators.com, and it'll tell you exactly which ones work. The Octa Dome 30, which is a tiny 30 centimeter circular softbox, is included with both the 60C and the 120C. And this is probably fine. I want to clarify here, I wouldn't think of this as a key light in most circumstances. We're using it as a hair light here, and I think it's great for that, but it's not quite large enough to get a nice soft key for a face, for example, unless you're using it like literally 1.5 feet from your face. So I wouldn't necessarily plan on that being your key light modifier, just so you know. You can power both of these via USB-C with the included AC-DC adapter, or with the Amaran Ace E-Lock. And specifically, that would be something like the Amaran Peak battery. This is a pretty cool thing. There's a smaller one coming as well, the 75, but this is the Amaran Peak. I believe it's an 86 watt-hour battery. It has the specific Ace E-mount here, or E-Lock, and it's pretty cool. This is kind of a niche product. I mean, in terms of, this is cool. If you need the battery power, it also comes with a stand mount. So you can just lock it in like that and then attach this to your mount or to your light stand. But it's kind of also made for hand holding, for Hollywooding, if you will, where you actually do a walk and talk. And I don't do that a lot, so I can't really speak to all the intricacies of the ergonomics of this, but overall it's kind of an interesting idea. $130 US for the Amaran Peak, which is a pretty good price for a really high quality battery. Speaking of power, with the included AC to DC power adapter, it comes with a 4-meter IEC cable. That can be a little bit on the short side. Again, this is a sign that these are made for creators. If you're on set, that's kind of a short cable, but in most creator circumstances, you can work around that. You're usually working in smaller spaces, and so that might be just enough, and if not, you can use an extension cable. Like the larger Ray lights, these also have a high frame rate mode, which support 1/1000th of a second shutter speeds for photography or 240 frames per second for video. It locks the light so it can't go lower than 50%. And also, here's a test shot of us doing a flicker test here. We have set the intensity down to 10%, so dimmer to 10%, 11-degree shutter angle on the camera, filming at 23.976 frames per second. This is the equivalent of 1/785th of a second shutter speed, and we're not seeing any sort of flicker here, so that's fantastic. Let's address the beam angle. Some of the people left questions about that and were skeptical, I think, of the 70-degree beam angle. I haven't found it to be a problem yet, so I've been using the 660C for a couple of months now. If you use the modifiers that were designed for the Ray series, for example, like I mentioned, the 120 Octa Dome has an inner diffuser and an outer diffuser, so it takes that relatively narrow beam angle and it diffuses it enough to make a nice soft light. So I haven't found that to be a problem. You will also want to use any other modifiers that are made specifically for the Ray line. So for example, the Mini Fresnel is optimized for that 70-degree beam angle, so you'll want to probably focus on using something like that. Is it less efficient because of that narrower beam angle in the softboxes? Possibly, but again, I haven't run into any issues with that, just doing talking head lighting like this. And this is a 60C. This is the smallest light they'd offer, and I'm at 60% on the dimmer. So I don't feel like that's a problem. But if you need to light bigger spaces, then you're going to want to move up to the bigger lights or to one of the aperture lights. So keep that in mind. Now, here's the thing that makes these pretty breakthrough. The pricing on them for the 60C is $189 US, for the 120C, $259 US. That's an amazing price for these lights. Now, let me give you context. I'm thinking back 10 years ago, literally, actually 10 and a half years ago now, when the first Aperture Light Storm lights came out. They were a panel. They were $700, I think, or maybe, I think they were $700 for a panel. Couldn't control them as well. There weren't really any good modifiers for them because they were a panel light. They were the first lights that were less than $1,000 that had quite good color quality for LEDs back in that day. I'm aging myself, but in any case, we've come a long way, and these lights are more powerful than that and pretty darn amazing. So, so what are the smaller rays? Who are they for, and what are they good at versus the 360C and the 660C, the much bigger lights? Well, obviously it's a much smaller profile, and it's made for working in tighter spaces, but without any sort of sacrifice in terms of which modifiers you can use or the amount of output. The output is actually quite impressive for these lights. I would say that the yoke is a little bit different. So in other words, if you do need to angle them down quite a bit, you're going to need to come up with some sort of solution for that. If you're using a C-stand with a grip head and a baby pin, that's no problem. If you're using other kind of travel light stands, you might need to come up with some other sort of solution. That's really it. I think the 60C and the 120C are great for at-home creators, working in a small bedroom, a den, a garage, gaming streamers, DIY vloggers, influencers, lifestyle creators, whatever you want to call yourselves. Basically anybody who doesn't need the versatility and the increased durability of a more studio-style light, like the 360C or the 660C or any of the Aperture lights as well. The 360C and the 660C are probably more for people like me working in corporate and education video, where I need something that's a little bit more robust, possibly a little bit more powerful if I'm lighting a larger space, and just has all the features that I need. But really, I would say the build quality of all these ray lights is better than their price points might indicate, I would say. It's not a toy, but it's not a tank, so it's somewhere right in the middle. It's really kind of a nice middle of the road tune for those of us that don't have massive budgets to work with, but also want something that's not cheap plastic that's going to break. So overall, hope that was helpful for you. Get out there and make some great lighting designs. Talk to you again soon.